would say to the community, in projects which you send us, which, number one, clearly identify the skills, abilities, capacities, and assets which local residents will contribute to the proposal. And of course, we're interested here in particularly, you remember our session on the gifts of strangers? We're interested in how strangers in the community will contribute, bring their gifts in, young people, people with disabilities, how folks who've been on the edge can be brought back into the center. Secondly, we're interested in proposals which clearly identify the capacities of your community citizens associations and indicate how they will be involved in both governments and problem solving in your proposal. So not just the funded agencies, not just the institutions, but bring at the center of your proposal the citizens associations and how can they be involved. And third, indicate to us how this proposal will mobilize, utilize, enhance, and expand these local capacities. In other words, we don't want you to come back next year and have to tell us, well, we did our best, but things are just worse now, right? We want, in fact, to invest in you, and therefore we want things to get better after this proposal. So tell us how, in fact, you're going to be more able to handle your problems after this proposal. Fourth, tell us how this proposal will contribute to building the local economy by, for example, employing community residents or enhancing local purchasing, capturing public budgets for local use, doing all of the things that we talked about earlier this evening, since the economic challenge is so central for communities. And finally, then, we're interested in you showing us evidence of significant investment of resources and time by local residents and organizations before our funding comes in. In other words, this is the principle of the second investor, right? If I'm, Dr. Mays, if I'm going to ask you to invest in my company, right, you have a right to ask me, Jody, do you have your own money in that company? And if I say no, you might just walk. Yeah, I think you might, right? So this is the same principle with communities. If we're going to treat communities seriously as partners, as investors in communities, we can ask them, tell us all of your investment in this project. Is this project important enough that you've started it even without our money, right? That's when we know it's important, and that's when we know it's going to succeed. So those are some suggested kinds of guidelines, Ramona. Now we're also thinking about not just how foundations and funders in the world of philanthropy can affect communities in a different way, but we've thought a little bit about government. We know even less about this. But we do have some people who are trying to teach us. And John, do you want to lead us into that briefly?
Right. We have thought about how the United Way and foundations can take a new path to begin to mobilize and support these assets. Governments can do the same thing because, after all, governments don't just direct us, they take our public wealth and invest it. And there are governments that are beginning to take a new path as well. And one of the governments that we've been especially impressed with is in Savannah, Georgia. And here we'd like to introduce you to Henry Moore, who is the assistant manager of the Savannah government, as he tells us how, in a sense, they discovered the citizens and supported them rather than directed them as they began to take more and more command of their community. Henry?
The Grants for Blocks program was established in 1992. It really began out of a need for us to look at ways in which to get more people involved in our community activities. We had a showcase neighborhood program since the late 80s, and what we found is that we had reached sort of a peak where we were not able to get new people involved in our community programs. So we set up $20,000, which would be used to provide small grants to the neighborhood residents at the block level. The $20,000 was matched with about $10,000 or $12,000 from the Community Development Block Grant Program. So in 1993, we had about $32,000 to $35,000. Well, basically, the residents try to come up with a variety of projects in which to use these funds. I thought that it was a very innovative approach. In effect, a committee was formed. The committee looked at a list of projects that residents came forward with. There was a lot of excitement. They listed, they had suggested things such as paint grants for houses of the elderly, lawn care, landscaping in the public right-of-way, planting of trees, neighborhood signs, just a list of activities. They also had programs for the youth, taking kids on educational tours, providing educational opportunities for the elderly, taking them to concerts and things of that sort. In effect, it was really an amazing process because so many of the residents could see how $500 could make a difference in the lives of families. In my view, I never thought that it would be as accepted as it was. In fact, what we had thought, there would be less than 20 to 30 blocks in the first year. In fact, we had 76 successful blocks that were awarded, and those residents had to agree on the projects that they selected. So they had to go out and get support of the people on that block. And in addition to that, they had to make a presentation to a committee in order to get this thing approved and defend, in effect, their request. And the committee was the group of residents themselves judging, you know, the value of what was offered. It had to meet several tests. First, it had to certify that it was going to have some benefit to that block. Two, that the residents on that block would be working together on this project. And three, that they were committed to seeing it through. It would not be enough to sign a statement saying, yeah, we're supportive, and then one person would be standing there saying, I'll make sure this is done. Everybody had to work together on this thing, so it was to me, it was a total community success. And the fact that they identified a lot of needs that we never would have seen was really an unseen benefit in the project.
So here's a city manager of a major city telling about how, with the public's wealth, it can be reinvested in the discovery of the capacity of local citizens and their associations to define and solve problems. Now he goes on to tell us a little more about what the result of this kind of initiative has been, what a radical change has come.
The cost of this program really has been minuscule compared to what the kinds of programs we run in the past, and also in terms of the benefit to our community. We spent the first year roughly $35,000 in 1993, 92, 93. 94, we had, in the program, in fact, had 76 blocks in the first year. In the second year, 1994, we spent roughly $70,000, and we had 198 blocks and block captains identified, which more than doubled not only the participation, but doubled the effort as far as community improvement. And as I mentioned earlier, with 200 blocks now at work, it was much more visible. You could see the neighborhood signs. You read about the youth groups that went on tours. You could ride through the community and see the landscaping and tree lawn improvements that were taking place. It was much more pronounced. This program has helped establish future leaders in Savannah, and it's done it by surfacing people who heretofore had not been participating in any process in the neighborhood. Many of the families that we had were families who had been working class and had never been involved in any civic process other than voting. And so what we were able to see in the last 2-3 years now is an evolvement of this process of residents coming up and getting involved, beginning to, they see the need for tool lending libraries, for cleanup campaigns, residents who see the need for crime prevention activities and establishing block watch captains, which heretofore those blocks didn't have those activities. Residents who now come downtown to City Hall and press council when rezonings are coming before them, who now press council for more action on code enforcement and those kinds of improvements. Anything where there was blighting activity before it may have been accepted, now we have people who are campaigning against it, and that's good.
So here's how just one city took a new path. And I think it's very interesting to listen to Mr. Moore when he talks about the community. He says they, not we're running them. He's talking about people he sees they're supporting. He, it seems to me, indicates a series of principles that governments could follow if they understood this process that he outlines. So let me see if we can go over just a few of them that might guide governments that want to invest in community building. First, they should invest in the local assets of the community, the citizens, their associations, and support the control locally of their institutions and not focus on needs and deficiencies. Second, they should fund directly the associations and problem solvers in the community rather than exclusively on the agencies and the fixing and helping institutions that really are not a part of the community at its base. Third, and this is very hard for governments, they need to give credit to the community people, right? This Savannah venture, right, is really something where the city has not taken the credit. What has grown up is a whole new community movement, and the city has stepped back, and the community is recognized. We can't have communities growing if mayors and presidents and governors go and cut the ribbon and act like it was them. It wasn't them. It's our money. We are investing it, and we are building the community, and we should have the credit in community. Fourth, governments need to be flexible. They're big, they're systems. Communities are not. So they have to be listening, be open. And did you notice how Henry Moore was describing their following the lead of all? They didn't tell those local folks what they wanted them to do. They said, what do you want to do? How can we help you do that? Fifth, it is probably also important for governments to figure out how to get out of the way. A lot of times they have regulations that get in the way of local folks doing what they need to do. Well, you can't do this, you can't do that. You know how so many community people will say, we'd like to do this, but we can't. So the government should be thinking about how to get out of the way. And sixth, and I think of radical importance almost, is that governments at the local level need to begin to think about transferring authority, right? They're controlling everything downtown. And you'll remember the Dudley Street story. The Boston government took a precious power the city held and gave it to a neighborhood association that gave it the power of eminent domain, the power to take land, to rebuild its communities. So those are just a set of principles that are emerging. We think there are many other possibilities, but those are the ones that we're able to see.
Perhaps we need just a bit of a wrap-up for our sake, if you wouldn't mind, John and Jody, from each of you before we move to our close.
I think what we're absolutely clear about is that this work is community by community work. This is about, in fact, each community finding its own path. And every time we look at that assets map in each community, it's different. It's going to be different for each set of players. So that what we're about here in the national discussion is learning from the wide variety of experiences that people are beginning to share with each other.
And I think the other thing that I know we both feel is that when you begin to focus on that assets map, hope returns. There is so much despair in this nation, but if you will look again at our citizens, their associations, and where they have gained control over their institutions, your heart will start to sing. You will feel hope once again. Now, the book we prepared and the information we've shared here, we have gained from communities, and we wanted to make sure that it wasn't misinterpreted. Nothing we have presented is a map. It's not a strategic plan. It's not a model. Communities evolve from the wisdom of citizens. And what we have been talking about for 3 evenings here is a path, a direction, but not a template, not a cookie cutter. We think that when citizens are allowed to be creative in association, that they will make that path. And in fact, I think we'd want to close by reminding everybody of the motto of the Mondragon Cooperative in Spain, the most powerful economic community building initiative we've ever seen. And they say, we build the path by walking it.
We build the path by walking in it. And we're so grateful that hope indeed does spring eternal. That brings us to the end of Program 3 and the end of this series. I know we all have a better understanding of the importance of shifting the way we view our communities by recognizing the abundance of capacities already existing in our communities. Community builders can begin to tap into these powerful resources and launch an internally driven building process.